0 or -1 last night. So
Oh my gosh. Wow,
Go,
that's
go.
it was
crazy.
reminding me of my Alaska days.
Yeah. Well, we've had some nice warm days during the evening and the warm days during the daytime, but it gets a little nippy at night. Hey, Clark, what's happening? We got Clark, we got Megan. Good morning, everybody. We're gonna
Good
let you
morning.
in.
Yeah, well, awesome. Well, you guys, it's 10:01 and I say we just get started. I'm so excited to have everybody here today. You are in for a treat. I am so excited to introduce Patrick James. I'm in Colorado and I've watched Patrick's journey for about a decade. And one thing that I've been stunned about him is, his just influence, his ability to help agents just bring their production to, just high drive. I've seen it over and over and over again, you guys. This is not just an accident. Patrick has been, he was the um, director of expansion for the whole nation for an expansion team. And he also is a former team leader of two big offices, brokerages with another company. He's just moving. So everybody give him a hand. So excited. And also, he's recruited about 750 agents, has owns his own coaching company, and he's going to talk about conversations that convert. And so you guys are in for such a treat. I'm going to always be the one, and I've told Patrick this, I'm always the one applauding the loudest. So I'm going to applaud the loudest again. And Patrick, it's such a pleasure to have you. Welcome, welcome, welcome. And I'm going to give it over to you guys. Be sure and get your pen and paper out and get ready to learn and expand your business like he's helped so many do so in the past. So Patrick, it's all yours, my friend. Go for it.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Jackie. It's a pleasure to be on the call, and I'm looking forward to getting to know each of you. It's we live in a wild time, and I know, one of the big things that happened last year that I noticed across the board, both in Colorado and nationally, was even, we had more full-time agents step out of the industry since 2008. And how many of us remember 2008, right? Like that was right, there's Tom's hand. That was an interesting time, wasn't it? And we learned a lot. And so I think whenever, the market's changing and the market's shifting, we have two opportunities. We can either go into the social norm and say, okay, I'm going to go on Facebook and I'm going to hear everyone's sob story about why things aren't working. Or I'm going to look at this as a massive opportunity to take market share. And so, what we're going to talk about a little bit today is conversations that convert. Because what happens is when we're staying consistent and we're doing the activities, we're having a lot of conversations, right? The question is, how many of the conversations are we having that are converting, that you can actually take it from that conversation to the contract, to going into escrow or pending, all the way to closing, and then rinse and repeat. There's on average, there's 20 to 25 different sets of hands that touch one transaction, every transaction. And so, do our clients really know that, right? Because there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes. And so, what we're going to talk about today is and then I'll dive into the PowerPoint in a second. But really, what we're going to talk about is going to be how do you take natural human behavior, sales psychology, and tie that into the lead generation that you're doing, and be authentic, right? What I'm going to ask you, and for many, we don't know each other yet. I'm just going to ask you to take your sales hat off, right? Take that off. Put on your relationship hat. when you look at one transaction, there's an opportunity to have 4 to 5 referrals come out of that transaction while you're in the middle of it. And I'll kind of dive into it and show you a little bit how that can work. I have used this model. When I was in production, I was up in Anchorage, Alaska, and that's why I have the Northern Lights in the background here. It's pretty cold in Colorado today, reminding me of home. And we closed right about 500 homes in the time that I was in production from 2009 to 2016. And so for 7 years. Now, most of that time frame was actually right smack in the recession. And we thought in Alaska, we thought we missed it, right? We were getting ready to pop the champagne and say, oh gosh, the lower 48, we're sorry to hear about it. Didn't hit us. Here's the reality. We were just late to the party. When the oil prices dropped, we were hit. And in Alaska, you have to be very, very good at referrals because the average turn time for a client is between 3 to 5 years from the time they come into the state to the time they're leaving the state, whether they're with the military and they've PCS'd up there, or maybe they're in the oil industry or another industry. But typically we have a 3 to 5 year time period, which means you have to be very good on building out national referrals. Because if you're not, you're literally cornering yourself. When I was blessed enough early on in my career to have a coach, and that was pretty intense. It was about 12,000 a year in the middle of the recession when everyone was tightening their belt. And what my coach and I discussed was be very, very focused around what my strengths are and what your strengths are, not the weaknesses. Use the weaknesses as creating a leverage piece for you. Use your strengths to really hone in and go in. For example, my strength was listings. So when I would go in, I was averaging each month between 10 to 12 listings per month. These were not short sales. They were not REOs. There's nothing short about a short sale. And I learned that the hard way a couple times. And so what ended up happening with that is in the heart of the recession in Anchorage, when unfortunately a lot of my friends were losing their houses and their businesses, our business went up by 250%, and that was based on database and referrals. So I was 85% referral based. That is recession proof. Right? Anyone can have a lead source. If we're not in control of the lead source, the minute that switch gets turned off, our business goes away. So think of, if you have a lead source, how are you building out the lead source? Meaning, how are you taking that initial conversion, and then from there, you're going to build it and build it and build it so you have a sustainable business. Any questions around that? Any thoughts around that?
Well, I like the fact that you say focus on your strengths and then leverage your weaknesses. So by leveraging those, I'm sure obviously you mean to delegate those out. So it sounds like a book that I am reading right now, 10X is easier than 2X. And he just talks about automating, delegating, and eliminating the things that are not in your 20%. So this is great. Keep going.
Yeah, 100%, Tom. You know what's great is if you do a really simple exercise and you take just a sheet of paper, draw a line down the center. On one side of that piece of paper, you're going to put what you like to do. On the other side, what you don't like to do. Right? A lot of times when we do that list, we find that the don't like list is actually quite a bit longer than the like list. That don't like list actually is a job description. And there's many different ways to leverage that. For example, I was sharing just a moment ago that listings, right? And so I love listings. I love to go in competition. If there was more competition, the better. I put on my soccer jersey and I got out there and gave it everything I had. Now, every single listing appointment, I would recommend every single listing appointment that you go on, please always make sure to ask the question, is this the only property that you would like my services with? The reason I share that is because I went into a listing appointment competing with some of the other top realtors from all different companies. And I asked that question. Here's what I didn't know. The gentleman, his name's Mark Couples. He is in Anchorage, Alaska. He's from Grand Junction, Colorado. He was liquidating. I walked out with 5 listings and a commercial referral. If I didn't ask that question, I wouldn't have had that. So how many of us would like to go into one appointment and walk out with 5 listings? Right? Not bad. So simple questions that you can that can create some incredible results. So I'm going to share screen here. And let's go ahead and get this started. Okay. So here's a preface for everyone. This is a 60 to 90-minute course. And so I wrote this and I've taught it in several areas around the country. We're going to do it in 20 minutes. So you're going to find out a lot about me around this and my personality. What I would encourage you is engage, right? We're on a Zoom. We're not sitting in a room together. So it's kind of challenging to be able to read all the body language. So if you have a question, come off mute, ask the question. If you're not able to do that, put it in the chat, please. And then I will share my contact information at the end of this, so you can reach out to me with any additional questions. But the reason that I wrote this course was literally because it's almost like putting our heads through a wall, right? Like doing call after call after call after call, and we're not seeing the action. Sometimes that's mentally because we're so focused on who's going to say yes versus counting how many no's we get in a day. When we change that.
Well, Patrick, you froze a little bit.
Okay.
You froze.
Am I back?
Yeah, you are. Yes.
Okay, cool. So let's go ahead and dive in. This is going to be our focus, right? Is the plan of attack and the goal. We're going to start with mindset and mind share. It starts here. If this is not in a good spot, if I am internally not in a good spot, it's very challenging for me to influence externally. And the other side can read it very quickly. The sales psychology around the DISC. How many of us are familiar with the DISC? The DISC has been around for a long time, right? So here's the key with the DISC. It's not just recognizing who we are, it's recognizing who the client is and then being able to bridge that relationship. And so I'll talk a little bit about that. Mastering the art of questions, right? We can gauge the level of income that you desire is directly related to the depth of the questions that you're asking. So if my goal is 500,000, $1 million in a year, right? Then I'm going to really have to think about the questions I'm asking that's going to create that. Versus if my goal is 50,000 in a year, it may not be the same level of questions. And these can be open questions, closed questions, tie downs, and takeaways. I'm also going to share with you a pre-listing packet and buyer's book that I have. It's not the buyer's book. Let's just focus in on that for a second, right? The one I'm going to share with you is from like 2010. So it's the questions that I can create out of that buyer's book to then focus around who I'm meeting with before I get to the appointment versus trying to figure it out at the appointment. So it'll save you a lot of time. And then we'll talk about some action items and we'll wrap up. Okay, mindset and mind share, what you take in. So let's start with this. One of the things that that I like to focus my day around is how am I starting my day? Am I taking the time to get centered, to realize what my focus is for that day? Or am I just powering into the day, checking emails immediately when I wake up, going on social media and get stuck right in the middle of the rat race, right? So maybe put your phone away from your bed when you're sleeping at night. So it forces you to start breaking that habit. 60 Seconds with Maxwell is fantastic. It's 1 minute. And John will talk about, he's very grounded. John's a retired pastor. He's written about 200, I believe 250 bestsellers around leadership, mindset, faith, different pieces that can help you really start the day with a focused approach. Diana Kokoska wrote Becoming More, and she's one of the industry leaders across the board the last 30 years. Now, Becoming More is not a real estate book. It's a book around how do you become more? Are you showing up like your future self would like to see? Right? What are the strategies that go into that? And how do you create those habits? So that's on audio as well as is hard copy. I highly, highly recommend it. Exactly What to Say with Phil Jones is fantastic. It's all around questions. So mindset. Let's dive into that. I'm going to shrink this screen a little bit. So opportunity versus fear. Fear is false expectations appearing real. Unless it's 1,000-pound grizzly bear charging at you through the woods, it's not real, right? Yet it can feel very real. Last year was loaded with fear. We saw it all over the place. Every company saw it. And the reality is false expectations appearing real. I'm either buying into what the media is telling me or I'm choosing to take actions and create my own future. And as we talked about, focusing in on your strengths. So this gives you a little start of the day layout here: mindset, reflection, affirmations. And affirmations can be something that you can dive into and change. Maybe you got your top 3 that you have that you say daily, right? Like, I'm a listing specialist. I am a listing specialist. I love competition, right? I love the market changing, right? Those are different pieces that allow me to charge into the day. Appreciation and acts of service, and then an exercise to clear the mind. So here's the books that I was referencing here. Becoming More with Diana, and Exactly What to Say with Tom Jones. And there's these are totally separate topics and books, yet they can combine together and to help you connect, not only with yourself, but with your clients or your team members. So we're going to talk about the DISC. And again, I'm going to do this pretty quickly here, so feel free. I'm not able to see the chat, Jackie, so if we have any questions, please let me know.
I'm
But
good.
the DISC is, if we break it down, the high D is a driver. They're direct, their results, pro risk. This is super important. So they like things that have an element of risk because they see the opportunity. And a lot of times they gravitate towards leadership roles. They're the CEOs, the management, or the leadership and entrepreneurs, right? That's only 3% of the general population. Only 3%. High I's are influencers. They love the party, right? They go to, as an agent, they may go to a home show, turn around and go to a happy hour after that, turn around and do something else. They feed on the energy of others, right? This is super important because it's a connection piece. They're storytellers. They'll tell you the best fishing story that you've ever heard, and then they'll follow it up with another one. That results in about 11% of the general population. A lot of times we see that in sales and marketing, hospitality. In our industry, we see that quite a bit. The challenge here is sometimes the high I's will talk, but they don't consciously listen, right? It's almost like that waiting to talk piece. And it's the silence that will create the magic. Right? It becomes uncomfortable until we get used to doing it. The high S's are the nurturers, right? Their structure, steady relationships are patient. They represent 60% of the general population. 60%. So if you were out door knocking and you knocked on 10 doors, 6 of them realistically could be high S's, right? Which means you have to change how you're having the conversation, or you may lose them. And I'll share with you in a minute how. They're the teachers, social workers, nurses, different pieces like that that are really engaged in the relationship and structure. High C's are more analytical. They see the world in black and white, very objective versus subjective. They represent 17% of the population. Now, they're the engineers, the doctors, the appraisers, right? Like, how many of us have worked with an appraiser who seems like they don't have a personality, but they're all numbers, right? It's just their makeup. It's how they view the world. Now, here's what's interesting. When we look at the real estate industry, and this is why this is super important, what we find is that our industry has a lot of high D, high I's, lower S's and C's. Now, every once in a while, we see those who are very driven and they're very black and white, right? They're the DC personalities. So a lot of times there's a combination between these two. But if we look at the D's and the I's in the general population, that's only 14%, right? So that could mean that we go into an appointment, we think we nailed it, and they say that the token response, let me just think about it. I need to discuss this with X so-and-so, right? I just need a few days. Here's what has happened. They're in process mode and we did not connect. And if we presented an element of risk, right, that could be sign the contract. It could be questions that they have that they weren't able to ask. Then they're going to stall us out. That means that this high S right here is going to be the one who's going to say, I just want to take more time. And then we wonder why, and we get frustrated around that. Instead, if we can recognize this from the beginning, we can slow down the process and make sure we're asking more questions than we are making statements. Any thoughts around that?
In huge aha, I just, I think I've understood the disc. I never saw those percentages there, and I think it's so important to, understand who you're talking to, and you can probably get a grasp of that pretty early, right? To be able to ask the right questions.
100%. Yeah, 100%. And so I'll share with you some ways on doing this. So here's my disc, right? This is from 2023. So you can see I'm definitely on that high D, high I piece. What's interesting about this is this shows the natural side, which is in the color, and the adaptive side, which is in the gray. Now, the adaptive is how I behave when I feel others are viewing me. So I'm pulling that D down, right? And the reason I'm doing that is because subconsciously I'm like, oh, I better pull that back a little bit because I may be going in too hard. Same thing with the I. Naturally, I'm here. But when I feel like I'm being viewed or I'm on an appointment, I'm pulling that I back. It's not easy to do. And I'll share some things in just a couple minutes about that. The S here, when naturally is here, when I'm in work mode, my S is just about enough to let you know I care, and then I move on. It's not because I'm being difficult. It's just I'm driven when that's going on. And my C is pretty low, right? Okay. So the do's and don'ts of the disc, right? Winning or not winning, right? Focusing in on the active listening. So emotion-based and higher rates of speech is the high D, is the high I. Slower speech patterns and more process and planning and logic based is going to be the S's and C's. So I have to consciously, when I recognize someone as an S or a C, I'm consciously slowing down. In fact, I have an anchor. If I was wearing a suit jacket right now, and even this happens on YouTube, like you'd see me touch my jacket the reason I'm touching the jacket is because I'm feeling myself start to run and I need to slow down. Does that make sense? All right, awesome. All right, so here's a quick one where you can see there's many, many different ways to go find out your disc if you don't know it yet. This is going to talk, just Tony Robbins has one. But if you Google disc, there's ones you can pay for that are more in depth. There's other ones that are free, and you can check that out. It's important to know where you are at so you can start recognizing where others are at. When I would go on listing appointments, actually, let me share this here. One sec. Whoops, let's go backwards. So when I would go on listing appointments, let's see if I can go backwards. Okay, when I go on listing appointments, I would find out from that listing appointment who that person was. I would coach them around it after they have signed, share with them how I knew where they were, and then from there, it became a game, right? Buyers would come into the house or an open house, and the sellers would call me and go, "Hey, do you think they were a high D, high I, S, or C?" And it became a different conversation altogether, which separated me from my competition. So many of us know the difference between open-ended and closed-ended questions, right? Open-ended is going to create more of the conversation. Closed-ended questions are you ready to sign the contract? Right? Would you prefer to meet in person? Is this a home that interests you? Ranking 1 through 10, can't pick 7, right? Most people naturally want to pick 7. So when you eliminate 7, it forces them to be on 8 or higher or 0 to 6. And it can quickly eliminate all these different choices, especially as inventory increases. So it'll save you a lot of time. Tie downs, wouldn't you agree? Right? Isn't that fantastic? When? Do you think that this is a great deal? That, right? A takeaway would be something different. How do you feel if you were to lose this home by writing an offer that's not competitive with the market, are you okay with losing the home? Tell me more, right? What is the plan if? So think there's all these different ways that you can take these questions and expand on them or condense them depending on who you're talking to. Majority of consumers move from pain and seek pleasure. Seeking pleasure is a type of approach motivation, whereas avoiding pain is a type of avoidance motivation. So understanding who you're talking to becomes very, very important. As I said earlier, the quality of the questions is directly proportional to the income that's desired, right? Here's an activity for you, is rank the quality of your current questions. 1 through 10, can't pick 7. And then the reflection piece, what and where are the gaps, right? Tracking your numbers. The top performers in our industry know their numbers. They know exactly where they're at and they know the gap. That way they can take the activity or direction that they need to in order to close that gap. Here's the key is practice with an accountability partner, not the client. There's way too many agents that I've coached over the years that have been like, gosh, that didn't work. And I was like, well, how many times did you practice that? The reality is they were practicing on the client, which is super scary because that in Denver is a $15,000 risk. Right? So get used to practicing with an accountability partner. What I would recommend is practice with someone who is doing greater production than what your goal is, and you will start to acquire their habits. Pre-listing packet here is going to be, it's not the pre-listing packet that's important, right? So when I would drop this off at a seller's or I would send it over, again, this is an old one. What I would do is I would ask them, hey, just wanted to give you a quick call to confirm our listing appointment at 10 a.m. on Friday. So they would say, yes, no, whatever that is. Did you receive my pre-listing packet, my seller's book? Yes. Awesome. What did you think? Right? 3 questions. If they said they didn't have time for it, or they'll get to it later, then I'm immediately triggering that they are a high D. I'm going to shorten that listing appointment. So my question to the seller would be, Mr. or Mrs. Seller, a quick question for you. What if we were able to take our 10 a.m. listing appointment, and instead of it being 60 to 90 minutes, we can do it in 30 minutes and give you back time? Would that be a benefit? Right? Now, if I was talking to someone who is a high S, I'm going to dive in deeper around that. And here's what's interesting. The high S's are nurturers. So they're going to go straight to the testimonial piece. And then from there, that's going to be the validity, right? It reduces risk. Remember, they're risk averse. So with a high S, it may be adding a little bit of time to that listing appointment. So it's all in the questions that you ask around this versus trying to figure it out at the appointment.
So Patrick, I have a question that just came to me. Can we see the do's and don'ts slide again?
Yeah. Whoops, let's go the opposite direction, right? Let's see. There we go. Was that Jackie? Do you see it?
Yeah, we see it. So,
Okay,
yeah.
perfect.
Sonia, I don't know if you want to ask your question, or did you just want to see it again? I think she's good. I think she just wanted to take
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, it's, really the do's and the don'ts. And Sonia, I'm happy to talk offline with you as well. The do's and the don'ts are really important here, right? Because the key around a listing appointment, for example, or a buyer consultation is based around the questions that you're asking. If we are starting by sharing what our marketing plan is, you blend it into every other agent that they've talked to. Instead, it is what is important about the marketing plan for you, right? If you could nail the top 3 things that are important to selling your home in this market in 2025, what would that be? And what would that create once we have sold the home together? Right now, I'm attaching them not only to the process, but to the end result. Now, here's what's interesting. When I would do this, I actually, for the high C's out there, I would embed a typo in the middle of my seller packet here, because the high C will read everything that's in the packet, right? And they'll go straight to the numbers, all those pieces. But what I would do is I would take TO and put OT right in the middle of it. And the minute that the high S would see it, the D never looked at it, right? The high I got so focused on the colors and everything else. They're like, oh my gosh, I love it, right? It reminds me of this time. That's how I know I'm dealing with the high I. The high S would go to the testimonials. The high C, though, what they would say is, I love the analytics and those pieces. It really seems that you understand the market, where it is now and where it is going, especially here locally in our neighborhood. What they would say is, before I let you go, that was the catch. Before I let you go, I just wanted you to know there's a typo. And I'd be like, oh my gosh, where? Page 6, paragraph 3, TO is actually typoed OT. The minute I knew that, I could immediately go into diving in on adjusting my listing presentation around numbers in the black and white. So I would go in prepared. Same thing with buyer consultations. This takes you through the process, which is important for the high S's and the C's to understand that there's a process around this. Okay, as we're wrapping up, I know we're a couple minutes over. And again, this was the rapid fire of the class. So what would be some things that you took away from this? And let me just go off of share here. What would be some different things that you took away from this, or that you think you could implement today?
Patrick, it's good to see you
Hi,
over
Heather.
here. I was really happy to just reset my mindset and focus on starting the day in a good way. So I really appreciated that. And also just all of the recommendations on books. I've been working on my disc profile and I'm all over the place. So it's good to get focused in the morning.
Yes. Yep. Start the day with the win.
I mean,
Absolutely.
I love that. Thanks, Heather. I also am remembering, and Dawn, I'm probably mutilating this quote from you, so you can correct me if you want. But I know Dawn has said many times, you get paid in proportion to the quality of questions you ask. And I think what you're driving home here, Patrick, is we just can all improve on the quality of questions. And, you know, if you're not liking your results, what questions are you asking, you know? So I really appreciated that emphasis today.
Yeah, it's interesting. Sometimes it's not even the questions, right? It's allowing the silence to do the heavy lifting. So there are times where I'm on, whether it's when I was in production, I was on, you know, a listing appointment or in recruiting, right? I get really quiet to the point where they will ask me, are you still there? Or like, you see them start to fidget, right? What I'm allowing is them to process.
I
And
think
once they're
that's
able
so
to
great.
process,
I was just gonna say that's
yeah,
so
Tom,
cool because I think what a lot of people do, and I'm guilty of it, is to ask a question and like you said, let the silence do the heavy lifting. But sometimes I'll kind of answer it for them. And that is so bad. Don't answer their question for them. Ask them a question, be silent, be quiet, and then wait for them to process it. So thanks, Patrick. Just wanted to jump in.
yep. Yeah,
Yeah.
no, I love that. That, Tom, is the power of having an anchor. If you have something in your suit jacket or something that, you know, don't fidget with a pen, but if you have something that you can just touch to remind yourself to stay quiet and calm, it's amazing what happens. Because the minute I talk, I'm robbing them of their thoughts.
Well, and if you do talk, perhaps an effective thing to do is to ask a clarifying question, because then, you know, that's signaling to them that you're really listening. You really want to understand where they're coming from so that you can best serve them, right? I think there's only about a half a dozen different objections that we get, right? And so we know how we want to respond to that objection, but if we can be patient enough to really understand where they're coming from, then they feel that, I believe, and just, I think feeling understood is probably half the battle of overcoming the objection, right?
Yeah. Well, and it's what's amazing about that is sometimes I need a prompt, right? It seems, Jackie, that you might be thinking about something. Would you be open to sharing it with me? Right? Sometimes it just needs a little bit of a prompt, and then I stay quiet again. Here's what I found out. I recruited a top producer this past year, and everyone, all the other companies had talked with her about, we could do this we could raise your production by this. We could give you a deal on splits. We could do this. We could do that, right? And I asked her, I said, what's the one thing that's the most important for you that no one has asked? Do you know what it was? It was an opportunity for her son. That's what it was. She knew she had 20 years experience. She knew how to do that. She knew how to build her business. She didn't need me to tell her how to build a business. She was interested in coaching. However, it was really the opportunity for her son. And then once that came out, so did the tissue box. And oh, by the way, so did the contract shortly after that. I didn't even pull the contract out. She was like, I'm interested in signing. Can we get going? So sometimes it really is that piece, and we have to be comfortable with that. I'm going to put my email in the chart or in the chat here. And I'd be more than happy to have conversations offline. I see Jackie's great question. What's the one question? Yeah, exactly, Jackie. That's a fantastic question. Yeah.
I have a quick question before we hang up. What about, so like, I feel like the data, you always have to have the data when you're on a listing appointment. They need to see the comps. They need to know what's selling, how much it's selling for. How do you weigh that amount of how much you focus on that based if somebody is, say, like a high S versus a high D or C?
Well, it's a great question, Noel. So with the high S, it's explaining what the data does, right? What the data does for them, why that's important. For example, the current appreciation in your neighborhood is either going up by XYZ or it's reducing by XYZ, right? Why this is important. Tie that into the relationships that they have in the neighborhood.
Okay.
And from there, you gain the trust and it opens up the door, right, to having conversations with the other neighbors. But when you slow down to share why it's important and why working with me reduces your risk, and oh, by the way, the data, right, the path is the math, and the data is actually what can help us move the needle so that you can achieve your goals, right? So let's dive into what those goals are.
Got
Is
it.
that helpful?
Yeah, it is, because I'm working with a couple right now, and they're just like the sweetest, warmest, very introverted people, but I can see, like, I don't want to glaze them over with, so here's all the data, you know? So I was
Yeah.
just curious on that. Thank you for your help.
Yeah, and sometimes it's just they need permission to be able to share what's going on so they don't feel like there's risk associated. The high D is totally the opposite, right? The high D is let's get it sold and go. Awesome. Here's the different investments or investment properties that could be available for you, whether it's here locally or, oh, by the way, I'm with a national network. Have you thought of investing in India? Thought of investing in St. Louis, right? Like creating that path for them it can be massively powerful. And I'll share one story with you as Jackie, I know I'm out of time here. So I'll share one quick story. I was here, I'm gonna date myself a little bit. I remember the good old days of Craigslist when we ran out of lead sources and we were calling on Craigslist. And so there was a gentleman up in Alaska who had a Craigslist ad. No one was calling on it because he was like, well, I will pay up to 3% or will pay up to 2%, something like that. Here was the reality. He didn't know how percentages work or how our industry is set up. So I asked him, he was a super quick talker. I asked him what he did. He told me he was the owner of a sheet metal company, had 75 employees, wanted to sell the home himself. So I went to the home and I said, hey, quick question for you. If I had 30 minutes or less, we do a listing appointment. And then after 30 minutes, it's on you whether we keep going or not. And he said, okay, cool. Yeah, come over. I said, I'll bring a cup of coffee. Went over there. Was 30 minutes, literally on the dot, 32 minutes he signed. We sold the home. It was a FSBO. So I converted the FSBO, sold the home in 12 days. Again, speed, brought the buyer, right? And my deal, his name's Corey Houston. My deal with Corey was, we're gonna do this together. We're gonna get your home sold. We're gonna beat the market. We're gonna turn heads all over the neighborhood. Here's my one ask to you, that you will become my number one cheerleader. Ladies and gentlemen, that conversation, that Craigslist ad that was converted led to over 2.5 million sales in production sales in a neighborhood that was full of FSBOs, right? At a 350 price point. So you could do the math on that. It all started by being able to connect. And once I was able to do that, Corey is a lifelong raving fan. So that's the power of recognizing who someone is.
I love that. So yeah, you guys, I would say, look at the chat. You can reach out to Patrick if you want to have more conversations. I know Miriam had mentioned, I have my DISC results, but I've had a hard time analyzing the results, so I need to study this more. I love that, Miriam, and I know Don mentioned that, we have several people on the team who can help you to interpret that as well. And I do think the mirror and matching, if you're a high D, and you're talking to someone who's a high S, you are missing the boat. If you're talking like a high D, you're missing the boat and probably not getting that listing. So I think it's such a huge thing. You guys, I just appreciate you being on here. I hope it spurred some questions in your mind, and also some solutions to rock your world in 25. And Tom, who we have next week?
Okay, well, thank you so much, Patrick, Jackie. This was amazing. So next week we've got Russell Enyart, and he's got a star-studded speaker coming up for us. So this is just great. So, but remember, yes, we have to have conversations that convert, but we first have to have conversations. So it's all about having those conversations, picking up that 200-pound gorilla phone or whatever, and just calling, chatting with people, creating those relationships, and put our relationship hat on. Take your sales hat off and put on a relationship hat, because people are going through life, difficult times, and they need problems to be solved. Money changes hands when problems get solved. So now y'all get your inspiration. Time to put into perspiration, put in those conversations. Thank you so much, Patrick, Jackie. We'll see y'all next week. Thanks. Bye now.
Patrick. Thanks, Jackie.
Great job, Patrick.